Hi loves. Today will be a quick workshop through Chaturanga Dandasana, four-limb staff pose, or sometimes called low plank pose. So I've got some blocks at the ready, some plank handles, and a yoga wedge. So when we're moving through vinyasa practice, a Surya Namaskar practice, we'll often see one of a couple options. Hi loves. Today will be a quick workshop through Chaturanga Dandasana, four-limb staff pose, or sometimes called low plank pose. So I have some blocks at the ready, some plank handles, and a yoga wedge. So when we're moving through a Vinyasa Surya Namaskar practice, we'll often see a couple of options. One of them is knees, chest, chin to move through cobra, or plank, low plank to move through upward facing dog. So there's a lot of intense weight bearing at the wrists happening there, and I see a few different things to try to compensate both for the wrists and for the core, and I want to run through a few different options. So as we are getting ready to step or float or hop back, traditionally in our Ashtanga Vinyasa practice, if we were to float the legs back, we would actually be floating directly back to Chaturanga. So we're landing with a generous bend into the elbows. So a couple of options would be to find that nice deep bend in the knees, plant the hands, and then just slow step the legs back, landing in plank as an intermediary step, eye of the elbows, pointing forward. If we're really wanting to move toward that float practice, we're not quite there yet, we can try a little hop as an intermediary step. What I often see in the hop though is that people, they really want to hop the legs back, and so it's this sort of aggressive hop and flop and land with locked elbows. And I see like ow for the elbows and ow for the low back, and my body and my joints don't like that. So if you're really wanting to work with that hop as moving toward your float back to Chaturanga, what I would recommend is that you try to hop those legs back as silently and as lightly as you can. So planting those hands, still bringing some of your weight forward to your palms, and then as quietly and lightly as you can, hop those legs back and see if you can land with some lightness and a bend into the elbows. So one option here, keeping the elbows drawing in toward the low body, lowering the knees, lowering the chest, lowering the chin, drawing forward, opening the heart, moving through cobra pose. We're using the low back here to lift, so the hands could float if we tried. Another option here. Again, finding that nice, slow, controlled step back to your plank, or trying that light, quiet hop and land back on the toes, and then lowering down toward four-limb staff Chaturanga Dandasana. So eye of the elbows pointing forward, elbows pointing directly toward the back of my space, and then I bring my heart forward and down toward my hands. My shoulders come no lower than my wrists, and I pause. If I'm having a hard time with the pause, I'm going to lower the knees, lower the chest, lower the chin, and move back through cobra. If I find I can maintain that pause in low plank pose, then I'm going to roll forward over the toes, press into the hands, open the heart, and see that my shoulders didn't come further forward than my wrist, putting unnecessary pressure on the wrists. Then from here I can roll back over through plank, maybe lift that tailbone, find a downward facing dog. So take a look at your wrists for a moment and extend them as far as they'll naturally go. So this is flexion, this is extension. So for some of us, extending as far as we can go, we don't even get to a clean 90-degree angle. And if you think about weight bearing in the arms in a pose like a plank, and if you're pressing your wrist past that natural range of motion, it can create a lot of pressure in the back of the wrist and the carpal bones. So I want to show you a couple different options. This one doesn't work particularly well for me, but I've seen it work really well for some other people. And that's 2 blocks near the top of your mat. And you're gonna bring your palm onto the block, your fingers dangle off the side. So we're not actually changing the angle of the wrist, but those fingers being able to soften down off the side, for some folks, changes the experience of what's happening in the wrist joint itself. And from here, you could practice your plank to low plank to up dog. So still bringing that heart forward, down toward the hands, shoulders come no lower than elbows, rolling over the toes, opening the heart, and then you could lift back through your plank. If blocks are comfortable here for you, you could come right into a downward facing dog that way. Plank handles can be another interesting option. I think they work best almost parallel to the long edge of your mat, but not quite. So same idea, coming back into that plank, lowering heart toward hands, shoulders come no lower than elbows, pause, roll forward over the toes, open the heart, up dog, trying to make sure my shoulders didn't come further forward than my wrists, lifting back through plank. And again, if the handles work for you, pressing right into down dog. They also make handles that actually rotate as you move, so that can be interesting. And then one more option here is a yoga wedge. I love my yoga wedge. It's also very slippery. So I find that it works best to actually tuck it under a mat. And I'm gonna bring the edge of my palm just to the edge, but not over. So again, changing that angle in the wrist, but I still have the nice sticky resistance of my mat. Elbows pointing directly behind me, eye of the elbow pointing directly forward. A little bend into the elbows, plank. Heart lowers forward toward the hands. Shoulders come no lower than elbows, pause. Roll forward over your toes, open the heart, upward facing dog. Lifting the hips, rolling back over the toes, lifting that tailbone. Again, downward facing dog on your wedge. One option here. So hopefully that gives you some good info, some different options and variations that you can try as you experiment with your Chaturanga Dandasana.